How does Luffy do that thing in the opening where he, like, spins the hat? Fuck you. Gay.
Yo, who the fuck is MattCMG?
Hey paisanos, it me, MattCMG here, and today let's talk about live-action One Piece. In the past couple of years, I have become a pretty huge fan of One Piece. I started reading the manga back in 2021, got caught up after a couple months, and have been reading new chapters weekly as they've been coming out. I don't watch the anime, but it's been going pretty hard lately with the climax of Wano, that crazy animation. I became a big fan recently. I'm a big fan, big One Piece head. But if you saw my Big 3 video from a while back, then you'll know that there are some parts of the series that I'm not too fond of, and one thing that I was very skeptical about in that video was the then upcoming live-action adaptation of the series from Netflix. Given the Big N's track record for adapting anime into live action, it's safe to say that most people were not very excited about this at first, and I was definitely one of those people. The series then got a couple of major trailers that didn't personally impress me, but for whatever reason I saw a lot of people defending it and saying that it actually looks pretty good. I was very skeptical, but at the end of August, the first season was finally released. And you know what? It was actually pretty fucking mid! Yeah, I was personally not impressed by One Piece live action, and while it's definitely not the worst thing in the world, you know, there's some good stuff there to appreciate, it's definitely not as good as people are making it out to be. Gomu Gomu no, smash that like button, and let's get into it. I think I did that same joke in the other video. That was not good. So, the first season of live action One Piece, or LAOP, or OPLA? Let's go with OPLA. Adapts the East Blue saga of the manga, detailing how the original 5 Straw Hats come together and head for the Grand Line. As far as pacing is concerned, I think it's a pretty natural place to end the first season since it establishes the world and characters and it gives us something to look forward to. My biggest concern with this before it came out was how they were going to fit all of these arcs into just 8 episodes. Some of these arcs are pretty dense and there's a lot of stuff to cover in each of them. Even the anime, at a time before it was paced like shit, had to stretch these things out to like upwards of 14 episodes. At first, I thought that you really can't fit all that material into 8 one-hour-long episodes and have it work. But upon seeing how it was actually done, I'll admit that I was wrong on that. They fit Romance Dawn into one episode, Orange Town into another, and then 2 episodes each for Syrup Village, Baratie, and Arlong Park. That certainly gives you way more time to adapt these than something like the episode of East Blue OVA, but definitely not enough time in comparison to the anime. But because of the change in length, as well as a need to appeal to a more general audience, there are a lot of changes made to the story, some of which work really well, some of which don't. Firstly, I kinda don't like how they adapted the Romance Dawn arc, specifically because of how the flashbacks were paced. Luffy's backstory with Shanks detailing how he gets the Straw Hat is told intermittently over the course of the first 2 episodes, when it really should have been just in the first if you ask me. I get that the hat is a big focal point in the second episode with how Buggy recognizes it and then damages it, paralleled with the flashbacks of Shanks giving Luffy the hat to emphasize how it's Luffy's treasure, but I don't think they needed to hold off on showing us that moment. I personally think that this flashback should be shown all at once instead of bits and pieces at a time. I don't care if they front load us with it like the manga does, or if they show it after the fact like the anime does. I just think it's more effective if it's done in one go. Splitting it up like they do is honestly just kind of annoying. The same also applies to some of the other backstories in this as well. Luffy and Koby's introductions are left mostly the same, though I do have a few criticisms of that I'll get into in a bit, but a few changes are also made to Zoro and Nami's introductions. Nami's introduction is more or less the same as it was, just remixed a bit, and she's introduced a little bit earlier than she is in the manga, so I won't go too crazy with it. But Zoro, on the other hand, in the manga, Zoro was introduced while tied to a cross in the courtyard, which is one of the most iconic panels in all of One Piece. There's a whole lot of just mystery and intrigue in just this one panel. It's so badass. They adapt this in the show as well, but this actually isn't the first time that we meet Zoro. In the show, there are 2 scenes that happen before this. There's a scene in which Zoro kills Mr. Seven of Baroque Works, and later he beats up a bunch of Marines at a bar. I kinda don't like that Zoro's first introduction is not that cool iconic shot, but these are also cool as fuck, so I kinda think they justify their existence. I will never get over the fact, though, that Zoro's first scene in the show is him cutting a black guy in half. My guy is not beating the racism allegations. This actually demonstrates something else about this show. Because it's being made 20 years into its existence, the writers now have hindsight on their side, so they add in a lot of Easter eggs and references to stuff that comes later in the series. The cynic in me absolutely hates this because it's very Marvel, like, whoa, look at how many references we can fit into this one. Whoa, only the real Easter eggs are gonna get this fan. What? New rock stars? But at the same time, it does help immensely with the world building. One Piece is literally known for its world building, so who am I to stop more of that? Probably the biggest thing they cut in terms of just pure story just not being included was the Orange Town arc. By the time the Straw Hats get there in the show, Buggy has already taken over and the townspeople are already being held captive and their village destroyed. The whole episode takes place in his circus tent.
It's a circus tent!
And it's just a complete departure from the original version, at least tonally. In the manga, there's a whole thing about preventing the town from being destroyed. Nami is supposed to be introduced here instead of earlier, and the whole story with the dog and all of the villagers is almost completely cut out. I liked Buggy in this episode, but it just didn't feel like the Orange Town arc. It felt like filler so they could show the rest of the Luffy flashbacks, since a lot of the bigger story beats of this arc are moved to different points in the story. Syrup Village has a few changes as well, but they're mostly pretty minor, so I won't linger on it for too long. That arc in both the manga and anime was way longer than it needed to be in my opinion, so condensing it down to 2 hours was much more palatable to me. So far though, a lot of these story changes haven't been too bad, but it's when we get to the Baratier arc where these changes start to bother me a bit. My biggest issue with Baratier in the show is that Arlong is now the main fight instead of Don Krieg. In the show, Don Krieg is killed by Mihawk before his arrival at Baratier, which completely robs us of one of the better fights in the East Blue Saga. Luffy vs. Krieg is a great fight, but it's also very cartoony, so I can definitely understand why they would cut it out. But replacing him with Arlong kinda ruins the surprise of Arlong. It's not like a huge reveal in the original, but there's a level of surprise with his first appearance, like, oh shit, this guy's pretty threatening. Look at this guy. In the show, he's introduced very abruptly in a scene where he interrogates Buggy. There is no build up to it, he's just kinda there. Like, he just shows up in this scene casually as if he's a character the audience is already familiar with, which for One Piece fans is already the case, but not for new viewers. When I saw this, I frustratedly thought to myself, oh, okay, yeah, cool, that's just Arlong, I guess, he's just here now. Would have been cool to have an actual reveal for him. He appears again at Baratier to inquire about Luffy, and the two eventually fight, with Arlong tossing him into the ocean. I do not like this. I don't like that they fight before their actual fight. In fact, I don't like that they've even met before their fight. One of the most admirable things about the original Luffy vs. Arlong fight is that they've never actually met before, and Luffy just comes in and casually beats his ass with no context. I can understand narratively speaking how Luffy losing to Arlong first and then beating him in their rematch can be appealing to a more general audience, and hell, Oda himself has even done this exact concept in the manga a couple of times, but I don't think it works for Luffy to be losing fights in the East Blue Saga. The closest he comes to losing in the manga is in the Don Krieg fight, where he's knocked into the ocean by one of Krieg's last-ditch efforts, but Luffy has, for all intents and purposes, already won that fight. Everybody underestimates Luffy in this saga, and this is partially for comedy, but also to display Luffy's powers and his desires. It shows that Luffy is willing to and able to take down people who are considered way stronger than him if it means getting closer to becoming king of the pirates. He should not be losing legitimate fights like this.
What are you doing? Why would you kill him like that?
Anyways, back to Baratier though, one change I do like is how they introduced Mihawk, which apparently some people don't like. I don't know why, but whatever. While I don't like that he killed Don Krieg, that scene is pretty fucking awesome, and his reason for going to the restaurant being to find Luffy at Garp's request makes a lot more sense than how he shows up in the manga, where he just kind of shows up unprompted. I can see why some people might like the original a bit more, since it's like, oh, he just appears because he's fucking awesome and cool like that, but I think both versions are fine. It's pretty goated. Pretty goated with the sauce. Moving on to Arlong Park, there are a few things that irk me about it. Similarly to the show's adaptation of Orange Town, the villagers of Kokiyashi Village, or Coco Village in the show, are mostly cut out. They have a few scenes here and there, but they serve almost no relevance to the story the same way they do in the manga. In the manga, the townspeople are secretly aware of Nami's deal with Arlong to buy the village back, and this is why they try to fight back when they learn of what the Marines did. In the show, they are completely unaware of the nature of Nami and Arlong's deal. In fact, they actively hate her for it. This especially doesn't work for Nojiko, who in the manga is ultimately supportive of Nami joining Arlong's crew, albeit begrudgingly, when in the show she hates her for it just like the rest of the villagers. While I am getting a bit ahead of myself talking about the scene, because I do want to talk about it later, the fact that the villagers all respect Nami in the original is an important part of why her breakdown is so impactful. She's angry that not only were her plans ruined, but the very people she's trying to save are going on a suicide mission because of her. In the show, this breakdown comes right after the Marines take her money with nothing else in between, so it comes off as a lot more vengeful and selfish than it does in the manga. The show doesn't have that emotional connection between Nami and the villagers, so her motives don't really make sense, and because there's no connection, the audience isn't emotionally invested in what happens to the village beyond the surface level knowledge that Arlong bad. I want to see Arlong's fucking fat, girthy purple cock. That'd be so fucking epic. Where's the cock piece edit of Arlong with his fucking big purple veiner popping out? In case you haven't picked up on this by now, many of my criticisms of these story changes are that, yeah, They might have been necessary for one reason or another, but stuff like this most certainly does matter. Changing things isn't the problem. In fact, it's kind of inevitable, but rather it's what they choose to change and how they choose to change those things. I've always been of the opinion that if you're going to change things from the source material into your adaptation, which again is an inevitability, then those changes should be either just as good or better than the original. While the show did make some good changes, there are some more major things that they changed, like Orange Town or the Kokoyashi villagers, or some character introductions that many viewers wouldn't think twice about, but have a profound effect on the way the story works, not just narratively, but emotionally. According to a behind-the-scenes clip, nothing was changed in this thing without approval from Oda, which I find very hard to believe. I realize it's been over 20 years since Oda wrote these beginning chapters, but I just can't get behind the idea that he'd be willing to allow them to cut out the emotional core of some of his most impactful arcs. It kind of makes me wonder how much input he actually had. Like, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that the showrunners asked Oda for things a few times, and then Netflix marketed that as the show having him involved, when in reality it's not really his input, it's more like his general baseline approval of the show existing. But now let's get into some of the changes that I actually liked. For starters, Koby sticks around for the entire season in this one, which on its own doesn't really bother me. In the manga, Koby leaves the story for a while after the Romance Dawn arc, and he doesn't return to the series proper until after Annie's Lobby, with a brief appearance during Alabasta. There's a side story told throughout the cover art that was also adapted into the anime, where Koby and Helmeppo join up with Garp, and it explains how he becomes so highly ranked. This is adapted into the show, and as it stands, I don't mind it. It gives us the Marine perspective, it keeps Koby in the show and expands his character, and it gives us a reason to cut away from the Straw Hats every so often, which, as much as I love the Straw Hats, is kinda necessary sometimes. My only problem with Koby's inclusion is that Luffy and Koby interact way too fucking much. The appeal of their friendship, at least to me, was that they don't interact very much. They chose different paths in life, yet still support each other's dreams, so they realistically shouldn't be interacting much. It also makes Koby's subsequent appearances and interactions with Luffy much more impactful, since they still have that unspoken bond, and because we don't see Koby very often, it's fun to see how much stronger he's gotten since the last time. In the show, Koby and Luffy have several interactions in Syrup Village and Arlong Park, and while they are brief, they're basically the same scene over and over again. That scene where they say goodbye the first time is basically just repeated 2 or 3 times throughout the season, and it's like, dude, just let it be.
Yeah, we did this already. That's what's so fucked up.
If they wanted to keep Koby around as a secondary protagonist for the B-plot, I actually think it would have been pretty funny if he was still involved in these arcs, but him and Luffy just miraculously keep missing each other. It would have kept Koby around for the people who like him, but also keep his relationship with Luffy intact in its original form. It's not the biggest deal in the world since the emotion behind these interactions retains its original meaning, but the more it happens, the less meaningful it becomes. In a similar vein, Vice Admiral Garp is introduced in this first season, which is way earlier than in the manga. In the manga, he's introduced in the Koby Helmeppo cover story and is properly introduced after Enies Lobby. In the show, he's present from the very first scene where he gives a speech during Gold Roger's execution, and he remains a prominent character throughout the season, serving somewhat as a main villain where he's constantly chasing after the Straw Hats. I don't particularly mind this, especially given the Koby storyline they include, since they have like that mentor-student relationship. It just feels kind of pointless beyond that. For instance, Luffy being Garp's grandson is revealed around halfway through the season, but they never really linger on that, and it just kind of fades away and stops mattering for the most part. The fight that they have after Arlong Park doesn't really add much, it just kind of demonstrates that they're family and therefore biased toward each other, but they never really take it any further than that. That being said though, Garp is a really interesting character with a lot of nuance, and the show makes me appreciate him a lot more than the manga ever did. That's kind of it for changes that I liked. Just the entire B-plot. Apparently a lot of people didn't like this, but I thought it was like fine. Not the greatest thing in the world, but it definitely adds a little bit of something to the show. Though I could have definitely gone without seeing Helmeppo's bare ass. Good grief, he's naked! Moving on though, the musical score actually surprised me a little bit. I think musical score is probably redundant. I'm gonna leave it in. It's definitely very like generic pirate music in some ways, but there's also a surprising amount of like trap and like club music, which was kind of unexpected, but it fit in with the scenes that it was in. But I also think it's kind of a problem that some of the only tracks I could remember from this were ones that were also in the anime. Bink's Sake can be heard in the background of one scene, and there are a couple of times where they interpolate the main melody of We Are, and I think it stands to the testament of the anime's OST that I was able to pick them out of the crowd and not remember a single other song from this thing. Well, scratch that. The end credits song in the final episode, My Sails Are Set, is actually pretty good, though I'm not sure if it's ever going to be able to catch on, especially since they've demonstrated that they are able to use something as iconic as We Are. That song just is One Piece, and there's just no way you can replace that. But back to being a negative Nancy, I have a few nitpicks about the costume design. It's accurate to the manga and all, but some of these designs just kinda don't work in live action. Luffy, Usopp, and Sanji are fine since their designs are so basic that it's kinda hard to fuck them up. I mean, Sanji just wears a suit. I'd be amazed if they somehow fucked that up. Why the fuck does Usopp look like that? Why is Usopp smiling like that? He looks like that fucking TikTok guy. But the rest of the characters can sometimes look like cheap cosplays. I think Nami is the best example. She undoubtedly looks like the character, but depending on the costume, it feels more or less natural. For instance, the first outfit with the blue and white stripes looked really cheap, but some of her later fits look completely fine. Nami and Zoro's hair is also a big negative for these costumes since they are very clearly not natural. Green-haired motherfuckers don't actually exist, so there is no way to make Zoro not look cringe, and as far as I'm aware, Emily Rudd is not a natural redhead, so you can tell that it's a dye job and it does not look natural. It also doesn't help that there's this weird desaturation filter over the entire show that I assume was included to give the show a more rustic feel, but it just looks bad. Like, the world of One Piece is supposed to be colorful, so let's see the actual colors. It takes all the fucking fun out of these costumes. But on the topic of visuals, the CG is just not it, man. Will you just shut up, man? With a crazy world like One Piece, there was no question that they would have to use CGI to make it happen. There's just no way to do most of the shit practically. Luffy stretching, Buggy's powers, a lot of crazy shit, right? The use of CG is not the problem, it is to be expected. The problem is that they seem to overuse it for unnecessary reasons, or that rather some things just look fake even when they aren't, which is weird. Case in point, the Fishmen. For whatever reason, despite being played by real actors in prosthetics, these guys are covered head to toe in CG at times, or at least they appear to be, and it looks kinda bad. I could tell before the show even came out that this was going to be a problem, since every trailer seems to intentionally avoid any extended shots of the Fishmen, with the only big one being a few shots of Arlong. Arlong in particular just doesn't look right, and I can't quite put my finger on why. But I think it's a combination of the nose being too small, the actor being a normal human size and not this hulking monster that Arlong actually is, and I know it's not CG, but it looks CG, and I don't know how that's possible. Like, I don't know if I'm insane, but a bunch of these Fishmen look like they're animated when I know that they aren't. The Fishmen are just straight up black-coded in this. I know they are in the manga as well, but that's not until Fishman Island, so like, the fact that they're just like straight up black, it's kind of great, kind of epic. You know, I've seen some people saying like, guys, it's okay, they're supposed to look weird, but like, dude, no. They're supposed to look weird, but that doesn't make the CGI or the prosthetics any less shitty.
That motherfucker back there is not real.
If this is how they're handling the Fishmen, then I am scared to see how they handle Chopper. If they're based, we'll get Puppet Chopper, but I'm not holding my breath. Use this design, you fucking cowards. They also use CGI for a lot of other shit that didn't really need to have CGI in it. An example of this is in many of the fight scenes. So many of these fights use CGI for no reason. There is no reason to not do any non-Luffy fight as practically as possible because the rest of the crew's fighting styles are so grounded in reality. There's definitely some decent fight choreography in this for sure. Many of the Zoro and Sanji fights are filled with it. Even that first big brawl with the Marines is okay, granted it is a bit Marvel, but they're all bogged down by their over-reliance on CG. Like, why did this clash between Zoro and Mihawk need to be CG? Put them on wires and do it practically. I know that they did put them on wires at some point because I've seen the behind-the-scenes photos, so why does this still look fucking weird? On top of that, when they do need to use CG, it doesn't always look great. Luffy's stretching is super inconsistent with how good or bad it looks, and the scenes with Buggy's severed head are super fucking noticeable. The Sea Beast in Luffy's backstory doesn't look finished at times, and for whatever reason, there are a ton of close-up shots where Mihawk just straight up looks fucking fake. Like, he doesn't look like a real person. It's bizarre. In Luffy's fight with Arlong, he does the Gum Gum Gatling, and they make a pretty big deal out of it, but the attack itself is only shown for like a fraction of a second, and that's because it doesn't look good if you have to see it for any longer than that. This moment that should feel triumphant just fizzles out within a second because the CG isn't quite there yet. I can see why they're taking their time with live-action Avatar to make sure the CG is good, because they kind of rushed this one out, and it looks like kind of shit sometimes. And I also don't know what it is, but One Piece also has the exact same type of uncanny-looking CGI that seemingly every live-action anime adaptation always has. I don't know how to describe it, but live-action anime CG has always had a particular feel to me, but again, I just could not articulate what that would actually look like. It's just like an I'll know it when I see it type of thing, you know? It is all over the show, and it bothers the fuck out of me.
With me, you'll never drown. I'm a great mouth.
As far as the cast goes, I think they're all actually pretty great. They all look and feel like the characters, and they all have a clear appreciation for the source material, and many of them have good chemistry with each other. Iñaki Godoy was apparently cast as Luffy per request from Oda, claiming that he is always what he imagined Luffy as being in real life, and I can't deny he definitely captures the vibe. He's the right kind of goofy, but still brings a level of human groundedness that isn't really present in the manga or the anime. He's also not impossibly stupid like he is in the manga, so he's a lot more palatable to the average viewer. The other Straw Hats are great as well, though there are a few notable differences. Zoro and Usopp are more or less the same as they are in the original, just toned down a bit. Nami is a bit less lighthearted and much more snarky, and Sanji's flirtatiousness is very toned down. Sanji has a British accent in this, fucking immediate L. favorite character ruined. Oi, bruv, I'm Sanji. Hey, Nami, I would like to suck your titties. Who would win, British Sanji or New York accent 4Kids Sanji?
Where's the lamb sauce?
But yeah, the Straw Hats are great, the main Marines are pretty good, and I think this might be my favorite version of Buggy. I know that this is a very unpopular opinion, but I never liked Buggy in either the manga or the anime. I just think he's annoying. But in the show, he's actually threatening and funny. Jeff Ward is giving it his all, and we love him for that. That being said though, as much as I appreciate the cast, the acting is mostly just okay, as there are a few things that really bother me. For starters, some of these line deliveries are either really bad or really cringy. There are some exclamations from Nami that don't sound right, Luffy calling out his attack names feels very forced, and almost every Zoro line is unintentionally hilarious because of how the character delivers every line so deadpan. I get that that's part of Zoro's character, but Zoro at least emotes sometimes in the manga. Why does kid Zoro emote more than adult Zoro, right? I don't think that means the acting is bad, he plays the part pretty well, but it felt like this delivery was a deliberate choice by either the director or Makeniu that personally just didn't jive with me. That being said though, it can be pretty funny at times, even when it's not intentional. However, I think this establishes something pretty integral to why parts of the show feel so off, and it's because it tries to be both grounded and goofy at the same time, which doesn't really work. No matter if you're reading the manga or watching the anime, there is nothing grounded about One Piece. It is one of the zaniest, off-the-wall, batshit insane worlds where nothing makes sense and everything is exaggerated. Characters calling out their attack names or screaming things at the top of their lungs works in anime, but it doesn't work in live action because people don't fucking do that. You can't do that kind of crazy shit in a world you're trying to make grounded. At the same time though, you also can't try to be more grounded in a world that is already well established to be insane. It feels like the show can't balance this at times, and it's hard to give an example because it's just kind of a vibe you get. The only thing that's grounded about One Piece is the character's emotions, and that's the exact thing that gets people to resonate with it. This is especially the case for the East Blue Saga, which is specifically designed to get the audience emotionally invested in these characters. While this is the case with literally any story ever, early One Piece always did it better than most others. There are so many great panels and shots that display each character's struggles and their dreams that gets the audience to care about if they reach those dreams. One Piece live action tries to do this, they have those direct page-to-screen adaptations of numerous important moments, but they fall flat, and I think I know why. Because it isn't animated, it is also not exaggerated. I don't know about you guys, but something that got me invested in One Piece during its first saga was how the characters often cried. Luffy getting his hat, Zoro making his vow, Nami asking for help. These are all moments where their tears, but more importantly, their exaggerated facial expressions are the most important visual indicator of their emotions. They give off the vibe of these characters simply being overcome by a million different feelings that cannot be described. The manga and anime both nail this because the art style exaggerates their facial features when they cry, which accentuates their emotions. The live action doesn't do this nearly as effectively. When characters cry in this, you can barely tell because they're real people and their tears aren't as obvious. I think one of the worst offenders of this is Zoro vowing to never lose again. It is so Marvel in its setup where he's just lying flat on his back, then you see him slowly raise his hand and his sword and for no actual reason, and you're like, okay, they're doing this scene now, cool. This version just feels so stiff. They're clearly only doing it because they wanted to adapt that scene, but just didn't set it up that way, which is weird. Why would you want to do that scene and then not set it up for that to happen? And then because of how the actor delivers the line, it lacks any of the same emotion as the original version with its exaggerated screaming. Or here's an example that doesn't necessarily include crying. Usopp joining the crew. In the manga, the dude literally jumps for fucking joy, but in the show he's like, oh cool, I'm a pirate now. Usopp in general just kind of does nothing in his own arc, and really in the show in general, it just felt like they were including him out of obligation. And then there's Sanji's entire plotline, which lacks any of the same emotion that the original did. And this one especially hurts because Sanji has one of my favorite backstories in the series and is my second favorite Straw Hat, yet it made me feel absolutely nothing. I've made a lot of criticisms thus far, but from the minute I saw that second trailer, I told myself that I would be willing to forego all of those criticisms so long as they did one thing right. They don't fuck up the Nami scene. Nami asking for Luffy's help during Arlong Park is the scene that made me and so many others fall in love with One Piece. So if they fuck up that scene, they've fucked up the entire show. Guess which scene they fucked up? After finding out that Arlong made a deal with the Marines to fuck over her plan to buy back Kokoyashi Village, Nami breaks down in the street and starts cursing Arlong while stabbing her tattoo. In the original, this works because it's exaggerated. In live action, this doesn't work because people don't actually act like this in real life. People don't scream and curse the names of their enemies, so the line delivery comes off as very cringy. When Luffy stops her from hurting herself, Nami then points out that he doesn't know anything. Luffy's acknowledgement of this doesn't actually make any fucking sense in the show, because in the show, he actually knows Nami's backstory. In the manga, he didn't, so this line actually actually makes logical and thematic sense. The whole point of the scene is that Luffy genuinely doesn't know Nami's history with Arlong, but he helps her anyways because they are friends. But then there's the actual delivery of the line,
Luffy.
I don't know what it is about the live action version, but it just did not do anything for me. Like a lot of scenes in this version, it just lacks some kind of punch that earlier versions had. I even liked episode of East Blue's version of this, and episode of East Blue fucking sucks. Then there's Luffy's, "Of course I will," and it seems like they use 3 different takes of this line. They do the serious take twice, and then they do the goofier take where they recreate the manga panel. The latter is totally inconsistent with the rest of the scene and works much better in the original versions, but I thought that the more serious version worked much better in live action. It felt like the directors told the editors to just leave it all in, so the scene feels bloated and unnatural. In fact, I could probably just re-edit this right now and make it work.
Of course I will. Let's go! Right!
I know that the showrunners and writers primarily took inspiration from the manga, and that the Walk to Arlong Park is an anime-only edition, but like, come on guys, you couldn't adapt the Walk to Arlong Park? Do you know how fucking badass that would have been? I think this illustrates one of the most underlying problems with not only live-action One Piece, but any modern adaptation, which is that it feels like it relies way too heavily on the audience recognizing that they're doing the iconic big scenes without actually making those scenes have the same emotional impact. As cliche as it is to say this, it relies a lot on nostalgia and old fans like, Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the screen, but does not consider how these moments would actually work for new fans or people who have no attachment to One Piece. These scenes did not work on me because I have no nostalgia for One Piece yet. I got into it like 2 years ago.
I just heard about this guy 2 weeks ago.
And because I read the manga, the purest version of these moments are still somewhat fresh in my head. So other versions kind of struggle to hit those same vibes for me. A lot of these iconic scenes feel like low-budget fan films, which is the exact opposite vibe they should be giving off from a big-budget production. I realize that that's very subjective, but it's hard to deny how much emphasis they put on recreating these moments for the sole intention of pandering to pre-existing fans. Of course, I am being a bit cynical, the show is made for the fans after all, but it can often be to its detriment. And speaking of the fans, I know this can be said about any fandom if you're indulged in it enough, but One Piece fans are fucking insane. Back when Gear 5 was happening in the anime, I saw multiple people posting fake screenshots saying shit like, "Oh, One Piece crashed Crunchyroll, no other series could ever do this." And it's like, dude, your phone's on fucking airplane mode. These same psychos are coming out of the woodworks to defend One Piece live action. And while I think this could ultimately come down to recency bias, there are people out there saying that it's perfect, which it very much is not. Some people are saying that it improves on the original, which makes me question if One Piece fans actually read One Piece. Because like I've outlined thus far, it misses so many emotional beats, which is arguably the most important thing for One Piece to be doing. People are saying that the costumes don't look like cosplays. They just kind of straight up do sometimes. People are saying the effects are good. They're not. They're super noticeable sometimes. My point in bringing this up is that the series was hyped to high hell and back by the fans for various reasons, and now that it's out, these same people are out defending it with weak-ass arguments that only serve to prove their sunk cost fallacy. And I'm not saying this to shit on One Piece fans or people who like the show, it's just what's happening. While this doesn't apply to every fan, obviously, there are a large number of fans who were so excited about live-action One Piece that they wouldn't dare acknowledge when it has faults if they even see them to begin with. People are really out here telling me that it is a great, amazing, fantastic adaptation and show in general, when in reality it was just kind of okay. These people only see it as better than it is because the bar has been set so low in the past. Overall, live-action One Piece is something that I don't think we really need, like, societally. The manga already exists for people to experience the story, and if people aren't gonna read the manga, they're gonna watch the anime, which, while it has its major problems, is a rather faithful adaptation in terms of capturing the vibe of the manga. The show does capture the vibe of One Piece at times, but never at the times that matter. The only reason I could think of to adapt the series again would be to be more faithful to the original in a story sense, because let's face it, the anime has pretty terrible pacing and a lot of padding. A new adaptation would be fine if it were like a Dragon Ball Kai type situation, but in live action, that's where you fucking lose me.
You lost me with that one, family.
The charm of One Piece is that it is whimsical and unrealistic, so putting it into live action misses the point completely. Like, sure, yeah, you could do some of this stuff in live action because now the technology is kind of there, but should you? You know, I'm open to stuff like Death Note or Bebop being live action because these are things that are rather grounded and don't necessarily need to be animated. One Piece kinda needs to be animated because it's just not grounded. I think the core issue with live action One Piece is that it's taking something that is inherently not grounded, trying to ground it, but also leaving in all that crazy ungrounded bullshit, which just doesn't gel. I have seen so many people saying that this has broken the live-action anime curse, when I think it is yet another victim of it. The fact that reception for live-action One Piece has been as positive as it is sets a really dangerous precedent too, if you ask me. Now you might be thinking, oh Matt, you fucking idiot, how can the series being baseline good be a bad thing? You're fucking gay. Well, think about it this way. Netflix has been trying live-action anime adaptations for years, and they have historically never been very good. Death Note, bad. Bebop, bad. Apparently the Bleach movie and some of the Rurouni Kenshin live actions have been pretty decent, but nobody even fucking knows about them, and they are nowhere near as popular as One Piece. But now we have One Piece live action, which people actually like and has a wider appeal, so I think it's inevitable that going forward, they're gonna go all in with this type of shit. If you thought Netflix was pushing this shit hard before, you've got another thing coming, because now that they have one hit, they're gonna try to make a million more with whatever properties they have the rights to. And given their track record, I am not very hopeful. The fact that I personally found One Piece live action to be mid makes me incredibly scared to see live action Avatar. That being said though, I think the show does have potential to be as good as people are saying it is, because while it will never live up to the manga, there are a lot of things that they can fix going into season 2, if they even get that, which I'm pretty confident they will. Look at how fucking popular this shit is. If there is a season 2, I hope to fucking Christ that it's better. To sum this video up, One Piece live action is mid as fuck. It's definitely an enjoyable watch as a fan of the series. You know, I had a pretty good time watching it, but it's just not great. As a show and as an adaptation, it's just kind of okay, because so much of the charm and stuff that worked in the original is just lost in translation. I hope that if there is a season 2, it can improve upon the foundation that season 1 has established and be able to bring One Piece to more people. But what do you all think, right? Am I wrong?
Are you
Am I
crazy?
Am I
Are you out of your
lying?
mind?
Or am I in fact spitting? Do I got that Mera no me? But let me know what you guys think of One Piece live action in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, Patreon, all that shit. I am MattCMG, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
The One Piece! The One Piece is real!
Let's get some pussy tonight.